I'm going to walk through the changes in the 0.30 release of Cursor Notebook MCP. The first one is that we added SFTP support for remote notebooks. So you can basically boot up the MCP server and enable SFTP mode. You point it to a remote server that's got an SSH service running with the SFTP subservice enabled, and you do some authentication during the boot up, and now you can go and make tool calls that will edit those files on that remote server. The other one is we upgraded FastMCP to the latest version, and with that came support for streamable HTTP, which is the recommended way of doing the network-based MCP tool. So SSE is still there as an option, along with standard IO, but I've been using it really with streamable HTTP now. It seems to be the recommended approach. There were a few tools added, the ability to edit the cell output, to bulk add cells, which is great if you are cost conscious and each tool call costs money. Instead of doing like a dozen tool calls to create a notebook, now it can do one. It takes a little bit longer. I can demonstrate that, but that is a nice option. And get server path context is a big one, just trying to help the models or the agents understand, when the user asks to create a file or edit a file, where should they create it? It gives them the tools to understand the server context and the project context. There's some other things here. A couple of issues have been addressed. The ones that have closed over here, and I'll probably provide some more comments in these threads about what was done. We'll come back to that one. Maybe what I should do is let's get the server running first, and then we can go and take a look at that, because we need the server up for that. So right now what I'm going to do is let's go, I did a git clone. I've got that local directory. I created an environment with UV, and I've activated that environment. I did the, in this case, I did the pip install. It's not installing the package from PyPy, but that's coming after I do this video and update things. Then I'll get that package out. So right now what I'm going to do is run Cursor Notebook with transport streamable HTTP. The default port is 8080. And I'm specifying the allow root as /users git. And it's not a debug node, so there's not a lot of details on the log, but it's now up and running. And now I'm going to go into Cursor. It's Cursor settings, MCP, add new global MCP server. It's probably blank by default, but what we're going to do is add in the same stuff we saw over here. The name, Notebook MCP, and then this is the URL you're going to use. It's hard to read there, but it's 127.0.0.8080/MCP. Right? That's what you use for streamable HTTP. If you're using SSE, then it's /SSE. But if you're using streamable HTTP, it's MCP. So we go back, we save, we can see in the output down here, you can pull up output MCP logs to kind of see what's happening. And it found some tools, so we know it's working. We got the green light, we can see all the tools, the server link. If you hover over each of these, you see the doc strings. Okay, so we've got it running. Let's go take a look at some of these issues. So the first one, the no tools list endpoint, or tools list endpoint. This is an interesting one. I think we're doing it right, but I'm not sure. I looked at the spec, and it does talk about this. Now, what I ended up doing here is creating a little script that will demonstrate how this works. So in the repo under examples, you'll see demo tools list.py. So I'm going to run that, and let's go take a look at the top here and see what this did. Okay, so mainly the big thing here is, should you be able to pull up a tools list with a get, right? Like, can you go to localhost :8080/tool/list and get a list? I don't think that's required. We're relying on FastMCP for all the kind of inner plumbings of what an MCP server should do. I could go create something custom for that, but just wanted to show how this is currently supported. There is that endpoint is available. The difference is that it's just available over this JSON RPC. So this little script, what it does is it sends the initialization request, right? So it needs to kind of establish a session. And once that comes back, we get it, initialization succeeded. There's some parameters there. And then what do we do next? We send toolList, right? So JSON RPC, I think that's the session ID or something. And then there's a method tool/list that's sent. When that's sent, then what comes back is this JSON data, right, which is the tools list. And it's all one big blob there, but then we can go and parse it, make it a little bit cleaner. And so we can see the tools list. So that endpoint is there. It's just the way you access it is not, it's not a get, and that will demonstrate that. So I think that takes care of the tools list endpoint issue. And another good question here, there was this issue around the cursor rules. There was some tools. Diagnose imports was a tool that's great for testing. That's been removed. There is a validate tool. There probably was just a period of time where the README content was out of date. So there's now a new cursor rules that is in here, and I've dropped that in to cursor here. But you can go pull that up from the repo. And this is tweaked a little bit to basically just make clear how to work with that tool that gets the server path context, right? And it has some other guidance around the tools that are available. There's some new ones. One thing to note, I think this is interesting. Like if we go back to README, talk about this somewhere down here. So, yeah, the current cursor rules file that I just showed is really optimized for, I guess, the way I like to see it when I'm creating notebooks. I don't like waiting, right? And so what it'll do is if it's going to create a notebook, and I'll demonstrate this, like it'll go create, it'll fire a tool for each cell. It'll add a markdown cell, it'll add a code cell, it'll add a markdown, add a code cell. And that's great because you can kind of see things happening and you're not waiting like 2 minutes to see like, okay, it created this wonderful notebook with a dozen cells, but it was off target. So however, that costs money, each tool call. And so what this is showing is if you want to do things in a cost efficient manner, you can add this additional section to that file, to the cursor rules. Basically saying to minimize the tool costs, use notebook bulk add cells, right? Read the whole notebook instead of reading individual cells when you can. Stuff like batching things. It's just giving it some guidance on that. But for demonstration purposes, you end up waiting while it's doing that work. And I think this is what you see with some other tools. Like I think VS Code has some better Jupyter Notebook support now, and at least VS Code Insiders. And it seems to take this approach for creating things. It's doing the whole thing at once instead of it doing it cell by cell. I think I like the cell by cell actions. I'm curious what you all think. So the whole point of that is I think we took care of that. I think we clarified and updated the cursor rules. So this one should be good. What's the next one? Let's go back. So then the other one is the Windows path. Okay, so fix the Windows path issues. I had not tested on Windows at all before, and so now I'm doing a full test suite on Windows. And what I can show you here, this is from another machine, but if you look at this video, this is basically showing a cursor in a Windows environment, right? You can see C:/users gym, and basically running the server, right? So we've got it up and running, and then I'm configuring it for Windows. Same thing I kind of just walked through with cursor rules. And then if I skip, okay, so right here we can see it's calling tools, and it's creating a notebook, and yeah, so it's working on Windows. So I put in some tests to test Windows paths, and some of them can only run on Windows, and it seems to be working. So hopefully that addresses that issue. Okay, and then the third one was, this actually came in through a YouTube comment. Do you have any recommendations for you need to work locally as well as via SSH? So, and I realized I do that a lot. I'm connecting to a remote server. My notebooks are there. You could run the MCP server on that same server. That would totally work, but I thought this would be a good option to add this in, and so we did. So what we should do now is show how do you go and configure that. Let's go take a look at the README, and go down to, there's a section here on how to set up SFTP with an SSH remote server. So choosing this ParaMiko library. You need to make sure you've got SFTP enabled. You need to know how to auth in, and it supports a variety of auth combinations, but if for some reason yours doesn't work, let me know. For instance, maybe it's just by password, maybe it's by key, maybe there's two-factor authentication or a combination. I know I've got it working with a key that requires a password and requires 2FA. So hopefully simpler scenarios are supported well. There's some tests for those, but not everything. You just need to specify the SFTP root. So user at host, and then what is that remote allowed root, basically. And you want it to align with wherever you're going to be doing work, whether it's a project or a notebooks folder or some other user directory. Figure that out. The broader the better, but you don't want it too high because it opens things up. There is an FTP password parameter, but I would never do it that way unless you had it automated somehow. There's other ways of getting around this. The parameter's there, but I wouldn't use that. I believe you can use like an SSH agent, or you can use interactive. And when you boot up the server, you can type in your credentials. The path to the key, your private key, what's the SSH port, right, that we need to connect in over, and some other options there. You can take a look. So and show some configuration examples, and let's go take a look at how I did it, which was on another machine, so I don't have the video here, but I'm going to go start Cursor Notebook MCP, transport streamable HTTP, and port in this case is 8888. SFTP root is Jim at Kitsune in the Git folder. SFTP port is 3133, just a different port. It's probably not going to be that for you. SFTP key, pointing to that, and then auth mode is key plus interactive. And this is the IP I'm binding the service to. So let me just play it. And I think I'm just highlighting some things there. But you'll see, it just starts up and... Okay, I missed the first part. So when it boots, the logs get that far, and it prompts for the passphrase for, in my case, the key. So I type that in, and then, I'm looking for my two-factor auth code and typing that in. And we continue, and now the server's up and running, and, you can see here the Paramiko stuff. And then what this is showing is, okay, so here, if you look, I'm connected via SSH to the server that I'm editing on, and that I just defined the SSH or SFTP connection for, right? But this notebook server is running locally, right, on the same machine. I mean, it could be anywhere, right? But right now, I'm just showing, it's configured, right? It's this workspace, this project directory is on that remote server. And, now I'm able to run the tools, and it's going to line up. Here, you'll see the files being created, right? Fibonacci tutorial. Oh, this is showing the get server path context, is showing the, all the details about the local project directory, the remote, is SFTP enabled or not, all that stuff, recommendations on how to construct paths. And it's working basically. Yeah. So that's just demonstrating that works. So you can now create notebooks, use the MCP server with notebooks on a remote server. That was this one. So that's why those issues got closed, right? There's still these other issues, like it's this is not a cursor native feature, so these cursor features like checkpointing, it is an ability to restore checkpoint. There's nothing that I can really do about that. So I would love to. I've tried, but I can't seem to trigger whatever cursor does to start this, which it's triggered when you edit a regular file, but for some reason it doesn't recognize MCP tool calls as editing files. And it doesn't recognize, even though the file has changed, like I even tried that, that doesn't trigger this restore checkpoint. It doesn't trigger a checkpoint. So there's something else that cursor's doing. At some point, I'm sure they'll add it for notebooks, but they don't have it right now. The other issue was this line context. This is also like an issue. Now, I have some tools that help allow the agent to orient itself. But actually, VS Code Insiders does a good job now of this, where if you're in a notebook on a cell on a particular line, that context is passed to the agent, just like if you're on line, 512 in some Python file. But Cursor doesn't do that. I'm sure they'll add it at some point. So until then, the agent just needs to, well, I've given it tools to kind of help understand what the user request is and see if it can find where that cell is, where that function is, where that class or section is in the notebook. There's an outline tool. If we go back to the tools list, notebook get outline, right? Which says, okay, here's all the functions or classes and which cell they're in. So maybe that'll help. Or search, right? Notebook search was also designed to help with that. But I think those things are going to be known issues until they're resolved. So I think that covers all the changes. A lot of it was under the hood, a lot of tests. The test coverage should have increased now to 82%. And yeah, so give it a spin and let me know if you have encountered any issues, have any ideas or suggestions. And yeah, I hope this is helpful. Certainly it's helping me.